With the importance of women only focusing on marriage and a family taking the center stage in the stay-at-home daughter movement, education or a career outside the home were discouraged and considered pointless at best and an instrument of the devil at worst. Welcome to episode 3 of the Daughters documentary, entitled Careers and Education in the Stay-at-Home Daughter Movement. I'm your host, Joanna Adams. In this episode, we'll explore how these teachings, along with the teachings of strict modesty rules, impacted the lives of women outside the home.
In the stay-at-home daughterhood movement, it is definitely not encouraged to pursue higher education in the form of a college. You are encouraged to do online classes if you'd like, but even that varies from family to family. Some families believe in having their daughters receive higher education, others do not. And so some stay-at-home daughters are given the opportunity to seek an online degree, online classes, things of that nature. But generally speaking, by and large, in the stay-at-home daughterhood movement, you are absolutely not encouraged to go off and attend college. Certainly not to go off and attend college in a separate city, separate state. But even if you wanted to attend college in your hometown, you most of the time were not encouraged to do so. These brick and mortar schools were seen as hubs of worldliness and false teachings and a false worldview. And so you were not encouraged to partake, if you will. You were also not encouraged to pursue a career. You were taught that Titus 2, when it talks about being a keeper at home so that the word of God be not blasphemed, you were taught that that meant that you can never do any work outside the home whatsoever. And when it came to making money or having a job, I did not have a job outside the home. I thought that was sinful. And how we're able to apply it to our everyday lives right now is that it's more about the heart. It is not saying that it's a sin to work outside the home. If that were the case, what's a single mom to do who literally has to work outside the home in order to provide food for her children? Or even not a single mom, but a married woman who they cannot operate on one income. What's she to do if she can't have a home business or work from home for whatever reason? Are we to say that God expects her family to starve? You know, there are a lot of questions that end up being raised when you start to realize, maybe there is not a one-size-fits-all command here, but it's more of a heart principle.
For Rebecca, she doesn't feel that mentality melds with biblical teachings.
And really, that's what the Greek word oikurgos, I'm sure I'm butchering that, but the Greek word behind the phrase homemaker or busy at home or keeper at home, depending on your translation, that word in Titus 2 in the Greek refers to being a guardian of the home, someone who protects it, who manages it, who guards it against attack, against not a hard and fast, you cannot ever step foot outside your home to work. If that were the case, we would have to discredit the Proverbs 31 woman and deny her the label of being a biblical or godly woman, because we know that she worked outside the home from time to time. She made sashes in her home. She supplied them to the merchant. She was involved in real estate, all of those things. And so she was known in the community. She was known in the marketplace. The same goes for women like Lydia and Dorcas and so on and so forth. Priscilla, a tent maker. So many women in the New Testament so it's not just Old Testament with Proverbs, but in the New Testament as well, women who really worked and sought to be entrepreneurial.
Emily Elizabeth Anderson explains how college was devalued, even religious schools that supported gender roles. The most basic explanation was just that it wasn't worth the money.
So I think what is an approved career versus not is based on your exposure to the world and how closely it aligns with your duties as a housewife. General secular college was certainly discouraged. Even large 4-year Christian colleges, something like Bob Jones University or Pensacola Christian College, those were even discouraged. So I think part of the idea of not going away, even to a Christian university, was I was told it was a waste of money. That if I was just going to get married and become a homemaker one day, that, there's no point putting me in all of that debt or a useless degree that I'm never going to use. So there was that, and that it was a waste of money for sure. And the idea that you're living out of the protection of the home, you're living in a dormitory or even just rooming with a couple of the girls, that makes you prey to possible attacks. I mean, I remember being taught that, it's not good to go live in a dormitory because that's how girls get raped, because you're not living with the protection of a man.
For Trista Anderson, this lack of education extended beyond the advisement to not attend college.
We weren't allowed to really work outside the home. Like, it wasn't even thought of. We were homeschooled, went from being public school to being homeschooled. It was anti-public school, very anti-government, because, we're just going to stay at home anyways, so why do we need to learn all of this? That's the way that us youth felt, and that's what the brothers actually encouraged. So, like, a lot of the other women, like my mom and some of the other women in the group, they tried very hard to make sure that we got some education. But I only went through partway through 10th grade. I don't think I even finished 10th grade. And then I got my GED a couple of years later. But it was always more of you're going to just stay home with your parents. It wasn't even any time any mention of moving on beyond the family itself was mentioned. It was like, raise all hellfire. That really affected me later in life. So it's just kind of one of those things, trying to learn how to deal with normal society after growing up so sheltered.
While college was not encouraged, it was even described to Deanna Coughlin as a way to turn you into a, quote, evil feminist.
There are some girls that I knew in very conservative families like mine who were allowed, like we were, to take freelance cleaning jobs, babysitting jobs, things of that nature. Like going out and getting the job or going to college was frowned upon because it would turn you into an evil feminist. It was never more rational than that. It was, girls shouldn't go to college because it'll turn you into a feminist, and then you won't want to do your God-given duties anymore.
Okay, so it was kind of like if you go to college, then maybe you won't want to cook and clean and get married and have kids.
I thought it was really unfair once I grew up and saw how the world really worked, that it was presented as an either-or decision, because I know a lot of women who have.
The movement of staying in the home at all costs was a lifestyle, and it dictated a lot about where you could go, who you could go with, and even what you could wear. Emily Elizabeth Anderson explains some of the modesty rules and how that impacted how comfortable she felt outside the home.
Pretty much everything else we did.
So no pants?
No pants. Only dresses or skirts that had to be below the knee when you sat down. Mm-hmm. So your knees had to be covered. Mostly loose clothing. You couldn't have anything that accentuated your curves. And as a curvier woman, that was hard. Find clothing that didn't make me look like I was in a potato sack. No low cup top. What I'm wearing today would definitely not be acceptable, because you have to have, here's my collarbone, and you have to have your shirt go up to your collarbone. So that was not no neck showing. Shoulders had to be covered, no spaghetti straps or anything like that. If you had to check your tops if you bent over and make sure there was no gaping. And if there was, even if the neckline was real high, depending on the fabric, it could still gape a little bit. So in that case, you had to wear an undershirt underneath that would hug against your skin. So when you bent over, then you weren't showing any more skin. And no words on clothing.
Oh.
So you could have a t-shirt that had a phrase on the front of it that was called an eye trap in ATI, meaning that somebody's eyes would be going toward the words and reading it, which essentially meant, a guy would be looking at your breasts, and that's not okay.
I've never heard that one.
Mostly I avoided a lot of activities because of my own embarrassment and false shame that I put upon myself. So I had what were considered modest swimsuits, but even then I still felt very ashamed of my body. And so I really didn't feel, unless it was like just with a couple of girls, I really didn't feel comfortable swimming. So the majority of my late teenage years and my early 20s, I didn't really swim at all.
In the next episode, we'll explore how all these elements came together and caused women to consider life outside the narrow options offered by the stay-at-home daughter movement. Thank you for listening to The Daughters, a documentary examining the stay-at-home daughter movement with myself as the host, Joanna Adams. Thank you to Jake Musiker for audio production. Writing and editing by Shalom, Baer, G. Music credit to the Aegis Destroyer by PC3. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow the show on Facebook at The Daughters Docu and on this podcast's website, www.thedaughtersdocu.com.